If you've ever been labeled the dramatic one in your family, listen to this carefully, because this story isn't about someone craving attention. It's about what happens when everyone decides you're exaggerating, and then reality shows up with a scalpel. My name is Maya Ellison. I'm 29. And for 8 months, my body had been trying to warn me that something was seriously wrong. It started small, the way scary things often do. A sharp pinch low in my abdomen, mostly on the right side. It would come out of nowhere, steal my breath for a second, then fade like it never happened. I told myself it was normal: stress, food, hormones, bad posture, anything that sounded reasonable enough to ignore, but it didn't stay small. Over the next weeks, the pain grew teeth. It became a deep, twisting pressure, like someone had reached inside me and grabbed something they shouldn't be able to touch. Sometimes it was a stab, sometimes it was a slow burn, sometimes it felt like a heavy weight dragging downward. I started measuring my life in distances. How far is the nearest bathroom? How far is my car? How far is the nearest chair if my legs suddenly give out? I stopped taking long walks. I started canceling plans with friends. I learned exactly which positions made it worse and which ones kept it barely tolerable. And the hardest part wasn't even the pain. The hardest part was realizing that pain doesn't just hurt your body. It changes how people look at you. Because the more often you say, "Something's wrong," the more people start hearing, "She's always like this." My family had rules nobody said out loud. Don't cause a scene. Don't ruin the vibe. Don't make events about you. We show up, we smile, we eat, we pretend we're fine. My sister Tessa was the unofficial enforcer of those rules. Tessa is the kind of person who walks into a room and the room rearranges itself around her. She's not stupid. She's not cruel in a cartoon way. She's just certain. Certain she knows what's going on. Certain she can read people. Certain that weakness is either an excuse or a performance. At first, when I started complaining about pain, my mom worried. She'd decall, she'd text. She'd offer to come with me to appointments. Then Tessa started planting little comments, small enough that you couldn't call them out without sounding paranoid. Isn't it interesting how Maya's stomach always hurts when we have plans? Mom, you're enabling her anxiety. She reads one symptom online and suddenly she's dying. It worked, slowly and perfectly. It took my mom's concern and turned it into fatigue. It took my pain and turned it into a personality flaw. Eventually, my mom stopped asking, "Are you okay?" and started asking, "Are you sure it's that bad?" And I wish I could explain how damaging that is, being treated like you're an unreliable narrator of your own body. You start editing your truth before you even speak. You start apologizing for symptoms. You start minimizing so you don't get that look. I went to doctors. So many doctors. The first one listened for maybe 2 minutes and then told me stress can cause digestive issues. He suggested I keep a food journal and try cutting dairy. The second one did a quick exam, said everything felt normal, and recommended antacids. The third one looked at my age and basically decided my youth was proof I couldn't be seriously sick. He said, statistically, it's unlikely to be anything concerning. Statistically, like bodies follow rules. One doctor suggested therapy, and not in a gentle therapy helps everyone way. In a this is in your head way. Another implied I was exaggerating to get pain medication. That one hurt the most, because once someone decides your pain is suspicious, it becomes impossible to sound believable. The more you insist, the more you seem hysterical. The calmer you stay, the more you seem fine. And through all of it, Tessa kept score. How many appointments, how many tests, how many times I ruined something with my mystery pain. She repeated her version of me so often that it started to feel like the official story. Maya is sensitive. Maya is anxious. Maya always has something. Maya makes everything about her. Then came the dinner that broke something in me. It was a loud restaurant, the kind with music turned up just enough to make conversation a competition. My mom wanted a nice family dinner. My dad looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Tessa brought her boyfriend, Graham, and she was in a good mood, the kind of good mood where she's extra sharp because she has an audience. I tried to be normal. I tried to eat. I tried to laugh at the right times, and then the pain hit. It was immediate and vicious, low on the right side like a hot blade being shoved inward. My hand moved to my abdomen before I could stop it. My breathing went shallow. My vision narrowed. I could feel sweat pricking at the back of my neck. Tessa noticed and sighed so loudly it might as well have been an announcement. "Oh my God," she said, "not again." I froze because I knew what came next. She leaned back in her chair, loud enough that my mom at least, and probably the table next to us could hear. Can we have one family dinner without Maya's mysterious stomach drama? I tried to speak, but my throat tightened around the words. I didn't want to cry. If I cried, it would become proof. If I showed pain, it would become a performance. If I left, it would become manipulation. My mom's face did that shift I'd started to dread. Concern flickered, then drained into exhaustion. She reached for something safe and useless. Maybe you should try those probiotic drinks I told you about, she said, poking at her salad like she didn't want to look at me too directly. Tessa smirked like she'd been handed a microphone. She won't, she said, because then she wouldn't get to have a whole storyline. Graham chuckled awkwardly, the way people do when they're uncomfortable but don't want to challenge the person in control. I stared at my plate. My appetite was gone. The pain was swelling, building heat, twisting. But I forced my face into something neutral because I refused to be a character in Tessa's narrative. I'm seeing a new specialist next week, I said quietly. Tessa laughed, not a cute laugh, a real laugh. Another doctor? Maya, how many is that now? 5, 6. You know what they're all going to say. It's stress. It's your cycle. It's your diet. But no, you always need it to be something dramatic. Something inside me cracked, not loudly, just enough that I knew I couldn't sit there another minute. I'm going home, I said, reaching for my purse. Tessa's voice turned sweet, which was always the cruelest version of her. Of course you are, she said. It must be exhausting keeping up the act. My mom touched my arm as I stood, but even her touch felt uncertain, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to support me anymore. Maybe try meditation, she murmured. Your sister might have a point about stress. I walked out of that restaurant feeling like I'd been erased. Behind me, I heard Tessa say, "Watch, she'll be totally fine tomorrow when there's no audience." But I wasn't fine. I got home and ended up on the bathroom floor, curled around myself because it was the only position that didn't make the pain feel like it was ripping something. I pressed a heating pad to my abdomen until my skin was almost numb. I stared at the ceiling and tried to breathe through waves that came in like storms. At one point, I actually thought, if I die in here, they'll still think I was exaggerating. That thought scared me more than the pain. The next morning, after a few hours of broken sleep, I opened my phone and scrolled back through old photos. 8, 9 months ago, I looked like me. I stood straight. My smile reached my eyes. I didn't look like I was bracing for impact. Now, in recent pictures, my face looked tight. My posture looked guarded. My eyes looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. I wasn't just in pain. I was disappearing. The specialist I'd scheduled with was named Dr. Klein. When I walked into his office, I was prepared to perform the role of reasonable patient. Calm, brief, not emotional, not dramatic. I was ready to present my symptoms like evidence in a courtroom. I started with a disclaimer because that's what months of dismissal teaches you to do. It's probably nothing, I said. I know I've been. Dr. Klein held up a hand, not impatient, just firm. Don't tell me what you think it probably is, he said. Tell me what you feel. Something about that simple instruction made my eyes burn. I told him everything. The right side pain, the way it radiated across my pelvis. The nausea, the fatigue, the pressure, the episodes where I felt like I might pass out, the way it had grown from occasional to constant, the way it changed my life. He didn't interrupt, he didn't smirk. He didn't offer yogurt. He asked questions that made me feel like my details mattered. How long does it last? What makes it worse? What makes it better? Any changes in appetite? Any changes in bowel movements? Any fever? Any bleeding? Any dizziness? Any family history? Then he leaned back and said something no doctor had said to me in 8 months. I believe you, he said, and I'm concerned. He ordered blood work, ultrasound, and then, when the ultrasound didn't explain enough, he ordered an MRI. No one had ordered an MRI before. I went home with a strange feeling in my chest, hope mixed with terror. 2 days later, my family insisted on another dinner. My mom wanted to reset. She wanted things to feel normal again. My dad went along because that's what he does. Tessa agreed because she never thinks she needs a reset. She thinks she's always been fine. I sat at the table, picking at food, feeling that familiar tightness building. Tessa was already sharpening her comments like she was bored and needed entertainment. Then my phone rang, unknown number. I stepped away from the table to answer. Ms. Ellison? A voice said, "This is Dr. Klein." My heart immediately started pounding. "I need you to go to the hospital right away," he said, and his tone was different from before, not cautious, not exploratory, grave. My mouth went dry. What did you find? I can't fully discuss over the phone, he said, but your MRI shows a large mass in your pelvis. We're concerned about what it's compressing, and there are signs it could rupture. You need emergency evaluation and likely surgery tonight. Tonight, not next week, not let's monitor. Tonight, my hands started shaking so violently I had to grip the edge of the counter. I walked back to the table and my mom's face changed the second she saw me. Maya, she whispered. What happened? They found something, I said. My voice sounded far away like it belonged to someone else. I have to go to the hospital, now. Tessa scoffed automatically like her body didn't know how to react any other way. Tonight, she said. Maya, come on. I didn't even have the strength to argue. Then Dr. Klein's voice came through my phone speaker, clearer now as the room went quiet. Do you have someone with you? He asked. You should not drive. Silence hit the table like a weight. My mom's hand went to her mouth. My dad finally looked up. And for the first time in 8 months, Tessa didn't have anything to say, because you can mock cramps. You can't mock a doctor telling you it's not safe to drive. At the hospital, everything moved at a speed that made my head spin. Forms, bracelets, blood pressure cuff tightening around my arm, nurses asking the same questions because systems never talk to each other. Dr. Klein met us in a corridor and pulled up my MRI. To me, it looked like cloudy static. Then he pointed to a shape that made my stomach drop. This is the mass, he said. It's large, bigger than we'd want. It's involving your right side. My mom inhaled sharply. Tessa stared at the screen like it had personally betrayed her. That can't be right, she said. Someone would have noticed. Dr. Klein looked at her for a long moment. It gets missed more often than it should, he said evenly, especially when patients are repeatedly dismissed. That sentence landed like a slap, not at Tessa, at all of us, because it was true. They prepped me for surgery. A nurse explained things in a calm voice like she'd done it 1,000 times. Consent forms, risks, possibility of removing organs depending on what they found. I nodded like I understood, but my brain kept snagging on one thought. I told them. Tessa hovered near the doorway, suddenly awkward, like she didn't know how to exist without her usual confidence. She took a step forward. Maya, she said, and her voice sounded unfamiliar, thinner. A nurse gently guided her back. Family has to wait outside now, she said. As they wheeled me down the hallway, ceiling lights sliding past like bright squares, I turned my head and saw my mom's face twisted in fear. I tried to say it'll be okay, but my throat was tight. Then the anesthesiologist told me to count backward. I remember thinking, right before the darkness took me, this is the moment where Tessa finds out the universe doesn't care about her assumptions. And then everything went black. I woke up in recovery, heavy and foggy, throat raw, body aching in a way that felt deep surgical. My mind floated in and out like it was on a tide. Voices drifted from the hallway. Dr. Klein's voice, low but firm. It was worse than expected, he said. My mom made a sound, half sob, half gasp. The mass compromised tissue, he continued. We had to remove the right ovary and fallopian tube. The appendix was involved and had to come out as well. My heart hammered. Removed. Gone. Mom choked out. If it had been caught earlier. Dr. Klein didn't let her finish. We likely could have preserved more, he said, but she was not treated like a serious case until now. Then, in a small voice I barely recognized as my sister, Tessa whispered, I told everyone she was exaggerating. Silence. Then my mother cried in a way I'd never heard before. Not polite crying. Not controlled crying. The kind of crying that comes from realizing you helped ignore a fire until it swallowed the room. Later, when the room was dim and the machines beeped softly, I heard sniffing beside my bed. I opened my eyes and saw Tessa sitting there. Her face was swollen. Her lashes clumped from tears. She looked smaller somehow, like someone had finally taken away the armor she wore as a personality. She whispered like she thought I was still asleep. I was so mean to you, she said. Her voice cracked. Every time you said you were hurting, I made it about me. Like your pain was stealing attention from me. She took a shaky breath. And the worst part is you stopped defending yourself. You started believing me. My throat was too raw to speak properly, but I shifted my hand just slightly, and she grabbed it like she'd been drowning. I thought I was exposing you, she whispered. But I was just bullying you. I turned you into a joke. And I made everyone else comfortable with that joke. Her tears dripped onto the blanket. I'm sorry, she said. I'm so sorry. Recovery wasn't a neat montage. It was slow and humiliating and real. It was trying to sit up without feeling like my insides were falling. It was learning to cough carefully so I wouldn't feel like I was tearing apart. It was watching my body struggle to do basic things and realizing I'd lost parts of myself that I didn't even get to grieve properly because I was still in survival mode. My mom became hyperalert. Every sigh I made triggered panic in her eyes. My dad started hovering, quiet and guilty, like he didn't know how to be emotionally present, but he was trying. And Tessa didn't just apologize once. She apologized over and over, specifically, without excuses. Not, "I'm sorry you felt dismissed," but "I'm sorry I dismissed you." Not, "I didn't know, but I chose not to know." Then she did something I didn't expect. She started talking about it publicly, not to get praise, not to make herself the hero, but because she couldn't live with the silence anymore. She posted a long message admitting she'd been wrong, that she'd mocked my pain, that she'd shaped the family's attitude, that she'd helped create the environment where doctors felt comfortable brushing me off. Some people told her she was being dramatic. That irony didn't escape either of us. She didn't care. She started researching. She sent me articles. She made lists of phrases that get used to minimize women's pain. She learned how to ask for copies of medical notes, how to request differential diagnoses, how to say calmly and clearly, "I want that refusal documented in my chart." A few weeks later, she showed up at my apartment with takeout and a laptop. "I want to build something," she said. "What kind of something?" I asked. "A resource page," she said. "A place where people can read stories like yours and recognize patterns before it gets this bad. A checklist, a guide, a list of doctors who actually listen." I stared at her, trying to reconcile this version of my sister with the one who smirked at me across restaurant tables. "We can't fix what happened to me," I said quietly. "I know," she said, "but we can make it matter." So we started small, a document. A shared folder. A simple page with advice on how to advocate for yourself when you're exhausted and scared and starting to doubt your own reality. Then strangers started reaching out. Women with stories that felt like echoes of mine. Years of pain called anxiety. Tumors missed until they were huge. Endometriosis ignored until organs were damaged. Cysts dismissed until they ruptured. Families who rolled their eyes until there was an ambulance. And then the messages from sisters. Sisters who said, I was the one who didn't believe her. What do I do with that guilt? Tessa read those messages with a hand over her mouth. "That was me," she whispered more than once. 6 months after surgery, I stood in front of a room of medical students. I didn't feel brave. I felt like I was borrowing strength from the fact that I survived. I showed them a photo of me before the symptoms started. Then I showed them my MRI. You could feel the room change. That hush when people realize a complaint can be a crisis. I said, pain isn't a personality trait, it's information. Tessa sat in the front row, hands clenched together. When it was her turn, she stood up and said, voice shaking, I wasn't just wrong, I was influentially wrong. I shaped the story my family told about my sister, and that story made it easier for professionals to dismiss her. Afterward, a student approached us with tears in her eyes. My mom keeps saying she's fine, she said, but she's been in pain for years. I'm going with her to ask for imaging. I'm not letting it slide. On the way home, I sat in the passenger seat, looking out the window, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not relief exactly, purpose. A year after surgery, Tessa and I sat on my balcony eating takeout while the sky turned orange. She kept glancing at the faint outline of my scar under my shirt like she still couldn't believe it was real. I used to think you were ruining dinners, she said quietly. I didn't soften it for her. You did, I said. You made me feel like my pain was a moral failing. She nodded, eyes glossy. I can't undo it, she whispered. No, I said, but you're doing something now. She took a breath like she was making a vow out loud. I'll spend the rest of my life making sure nobody calls someone dramatic when they're actually suffering, she said. Not if I can help it. And I believed her. Because the scariest part of my story wasn't the surgery. It was how easy it was for everyone, including me, to start believing the lie that I was making it up. So if you're listening to this and someone in your life keeps saying they're in pain, don't roll your eyes. Don't diagnose them with attention-seeking. Don't wait until a doctor says tonight, and emergency, and you're not safe to drive. Believe them sooner, help them sooner. Because sometimes the difference between she's being dramatic and she was right is just time. And time is the one thing you don't get back.